Hi, I'm Brett. Today I've got a really good opportunity to explain to you the difference between a good tune by a tuner who knows what they're doing and someone who's got access to tuning software for a factory issue who may not have the best experience or might not quite get their head around the way the factory issue works. And beside me, incredibly, are two STis, both built in the same month, MY15 models. And of course, here we are in 2018. This is the 2.5 series EJ engine cars. And the video that we're going to talk about in this segment is not about good or bad things of what people have done, and we're not here to can the quality of the work. We're trying to explain what you need to look for on how to get the best possible result out of your particular car. And both these cars have come into our workshop with different unusual fault codes, in the words of the client, or weird drivability issues. So let's just talk about this particular car first. Now this one, and interestingly, has got a built engine. It's got a Cobb modified air intake. It's got a Blausch Dom 1.5 turbo. It's got forged pistons, heavy duty rods. And the client had been commenting that the car just was, we had a tune, and then a couple of weeks later he said it almost felt like it lost the tune, or the tune changed, and then it wasn't driving as nice as what he wants. And it wasn't about the particular peak power he was hoping to get out of it, it's just about the drivability. So one of the important things to remember is you can have a car that's got really good peak power, but the drivability can be absolutely quite horrible, or you can have a car that's got amazing drivability but just doesn't have the peak power. And at the end of the day, it's trying to make sure that you get value for money for the modifications that you've done. And we all know the EJ 2.5 engines do have internal weaknesses, and this particular engine has now got a healthy batch of good performance modifications to give it that piece of reliability so you can get good grunt out of it. But interestingly, the client was reasonably happy with the power, but he was really disappointed with the way the car drove. So we got it in, we did some data logging, and then we were able to determine that the tune that was in the car was not the best adjusted. And in the words of our analysis, it was running very lean and breaking down under 2700 to 3200 RPM. And then as it went into boost, it was very, very rich under wide open throttle above 3,500 RPM. But also at the same time, it had very heavy knock retard present just about everywhere under wide open throttle, because the desired ignition advance was 6 to 8 degrees too high. And in some situations between 4,800 and 6,000 RPM, if you listened hard enough, you could occasionally hear the engine pinging. So you might be saying, well, what is pinging? Well, it's affected by the ignition control map in the ECU, that if you have too much ignition, the car will detonate too early before top dead center, and then you'll hear this, it's like having a glass jar full of marbles rattling under the bonnet in an extreme situation. Now, you'll notice I mentioned heavy knock retard present about everywhere because the desired ignition advance was too high. Now, when you set up the tune in these factory ECUs, they're amazing ECU with some really good features and benefits, but they can be quite complex and a little bit hard to get your head around. And if it's a tune that may be a canned tune or an off-the-shelf tune, it might not be individually adjusted best to suit this particular level of modifications. If you end up asking the ECU for too much ignition timing, what happens is the ECU, when the engine's running through the knock sensor, will hear it pinging and then start to retarding the knock. And what ends up with, if you've got an ECU that's listening to the engine and saying, well, there's something wrong, but then on the other side of the map in the ECU saying, well, I want more ignition timing, and what happens is you end up in a situation where it's constantly advancing and retarding the ignition, and at the same time you end up with a car that just doesn't run right. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, we then recommended a custom complete retune on this particular car, and we did it on the dyno because it is a fairly modified engine, and then we finished it off with some fine tuning and adjustments on the road. And interestingly, we managed to get a modest increase in power, but the drivability of the car is just daylight difference, because you would accelerate and you'd come on to boost, and then all of a sudden have this big dead spot, and then it would all of a sudden take off again. And that was one of the things the client was asking about. Now, what also was a dead giveaway from our point of view of what was something indicating may not have been quite right in the tune was, he said he'd get the tune adjusted by his workshop who did the work, and then he it'd drive okay, and then a couple of weeks later, as I said earlier in the video, it was not driving as good as what he originally thought. And what that was the long-term and the short-term learning of the ECU, because as you drive these cars, the factory ECU starts to learn the way you drive it, and it starts learning what setting it's got. And of course, these are the things that then start affecting the way the tune works from the initial setup. So long and the short of it is, not all tunes are the same, not all power is the same, and not all drivability is the same. So when you're choosing your tuner, make sure that you ask lots of questions and get some examples of what you can expect to understand how it works. Now, let's just talk about this car. Now, this car is owned by another person, and it came into us. Another workshop had recommended it needed to have the O2 sensor replaced on the car because it had a fault code. And on this particular car of this age, it's very rare to have a faulty O2 sensor. And in fact, some of the O2 sensors can be adjusted and tuned as part of the factory ECU tune. So of course, we then recommended to do a data log and a test of the car to see what was wrong with it, because we knew it had this modified air intake on it, and it had some other small modifications done by the owner. And interestingly, the owner was told if you fitted this Mishimoto modified air intake, it didn't need to be retuned. Well, frankly, I don't care what Mishimoto say on their website. The data logs prove for itself, and this one I've got in front of me here, which we'll show you on our screen at the moment. You can see it's clearly evident that it definitely would improve a reliability and drivability with a custom tune to suit this modified air intake, because when we were data logging it with this modified air intake fitted, we could clearly see that there was problems with the ignition knock correction. There was other unusual settings that the ECU was exhibiting because the engine just was not in a happy place. Our recommendation was either to do a custom tune to suit the modified air intake, or go back to the original factory standard air intake, of which we have done now. And then we've done another road test and confirmed that the engine is running in a lot more better environment, and it is a lot more reliable with the standard air intake. So that is proof in the pudding that the modifier intake was the root cause of the problem. There was nothing wrong with the rear O2 sensor, and it didn't need to have that replaced. Now, the important thing also to remember is on these engines, and particularly this engine, because we know it's got factory standard internals, they are very susceptible to cracking pistons. And our concern is, from a long-term point of view, with these modifications originally in the car, there may have been done some irreversible damage to the pistons, and we've advised the owner that the best outcome is, when they are able to, is do a compression and a leak down test done of the engine after pulling the spark plugs out, and just to check if there is any indication of possibly internal engine damage before that person then does any more modifications into the future. So there you have it, two good examples of a factory standard engine and a built engine, but it's the way the ECU responds to those modifications that ultimately has a huge effect on the outcome of the drivability, the reliability, and of course the performance of the engine. So from our point of view, we pride ourselves, remember, we're the first workshop here in Australia to do factory Subaru tuning back in late 1999 to 2000. When Ecutech first released the software overseas, we were the Australian people to first try it out, and since then we've done thousands of cars since then. Of course, we pride ourselves in a lot of this diagnostic work before we then go and recommend any custom tuning work, because we can then give you that peace of mind of the reliability and the performance and the drivability to get the most out of your car. Of course, you can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Instagram. We'll post some logs and some information so you can refer to it. And if you've got a car in Australia, we can do some custom tuning using our remote technology and the data logging like you see it here through our partner network around Australia. Just contact us directly and we'll put you in touch with someone, or you pick up the phone or send us an email, contact us on Facebook. Remember, go to mrttuned.com.au for our latest technical updates and info on our kits, or go to MRT Performance for more information and technical info and parts and info for your particular car, whether it's a Mazda, Mitsubishi, Subaru or Nissan or Toyota A6. These are the cars that we do a lot of work on these days. But for now, my name is Brett Middleton. Thanks for watching.